To all my rational thinkers, I'm your strategic observer, Maggie Liu. This round is a textbook reckoning in asset withdrawal. Let's enter today's story. I returned to the day Pei Huaiji brought a courtesan into the household as his co-wife. Unlike in my previous life, I did not curse Li Jiao as a seductress or force Saflo a potion down her throat in a fit of rage, nor did I use my family's influence to force Pei Huaiji to drive her out under threat of divorce. I curtsied with perfect decorum. Congratulations, my lord. Congratulations, little sister. Pei Huaiji hesitated, the hand supporting Li Jiao frozen in mid-air. Qingguan Yu. I interrupted him. My lord, little sister is with child. You should have welcomed her into the residence sooner and settled her properly. The 8th day of next month would be an excellent date. In my previous life I had cried, argued and clung desperately to my title as lawful wife. In the end, the Gu family was framed for treason while Pei Huaiji watched coldly. The men of the Gu family were taken to the execution ground and beheaded. The women were sent to military camps and forced into prostitution. I was drugged mute, had my limbs cut off, and was mutilated into a human swine, forced to watch them make love every night. What she did not know was that beneath its appearance of boundless wealth, the Pei residence had long been an empty shell. Only my dowry barely maintained its splendor. Whoever wanted to fill the bottomless hole of the Marquis's household could do so. In this life, I, Gu Qingguan, would have no part in it. Qingguan, Jiao saved my life. Now she is carrying my child. I cannot fail her. Pei Huaiji's low but self-righteous voice sounded beside her ear. Carrying a trace of affected guilt, Gu Qingguan slowly opened her eyes. Before her stood a handsome but exceptionally harsh face. Pei Huaiji tightly held the hand of the woman beside him, dressed in delicate white. The woman lowered her head slightly and secretly studied Gu Qingguan with a gaze that appeared fearful but was actually provocative. Li Jiao, the bone-piercing wind behind the high walls of the cold palace, the despair of seeing her loved ones exiled to the frontier, and the suffocating sensation of being poisoned mute, locked in a woodshed and frozen to death in her previous life. Countless memories surged back like a tide. In her previous life, she had stood in this very place. She watched the childhood sweetheart who had promised never to fail her bring home a mistress and demand that she be elevated to co-wife. She had been furious. She pointed at Pei Huaiji and cursed him, used the Gi family's influence to pressure him, cried and fought to protect her status as lawful wife, and even fell ill from rage. And the result? Pei Huaiji nursed a grudge. In secret, he colluded with political enemies at court and forged evidence framing the Gu family for treason. The vast Gu fortune was confiscated. Her father and brothers were exiled thousands of miles and suffered endless torment. Gu Qingguan was stripped of her status and locked in a freezing woodshed, forced to watch as Pei Huaiji and Li Jiao lived in luxury and harmony on the enormous fortune supplied by the Gu family. Elder sister. Li Jiao's eyes reddened, and tears fell on command. She shrank delicately against Pei Huaiji. If elder sister cannot tolerate me, Jiao will return to the country estate at once. I would never let my lord and elder sister grow estranged because of me. Jiao, what nonsense. Pei Huaiji tightened his arm around her in distress. When he turned to Gu Qingguan, a storm rose in his eyes and his voice suddenly sharpened. Gu Qingguan, stop entertaining those vicious schemes. Jiao gave herself to me as an innocent woman. She deserves the position of co-wife. If you dare parade that shrewish merchant daughter's manner before mother and complain, do not blame me for forgetting our past affection. In her previous life, the words merchant's daughter would already have made Gu Qingguan tremble with rage. But now she merely looked quietly at the two people before her. She saw the delusion and greed hidden deep in Pei Huaiji's eyes, and the triumph Li Jiao could barely suppress at the corners of her mouth. Gu Qingguan suddenly smiled. The smile was like a winter plum blossoming in snow, stunningly beautiful, yet cold to the bone. She turned slightly, folded her hands at her waist, and performed a formal, faultless curtsy. My lord is right. Little sister carries the Pei family's child and has rendered the household a great service. Gu Qingguan raised her eyes. Her clear pupils showed not the slightest ripple, and her voice was soft as cotton, every word distinct. For little sister to enter the household is my lord's good fortune and mine as well. In my opinion, the 8th day of next month is an especially auspicious date for welcoming a co-wife. The wind rushing toward them seemed to freeze. Pei Huaiji's raised hand, prepared to block Gu Qingguan's outburst, stopped in mid-air. The grievance and frailty on Li Jiaojiao's face stiffened instantly. Her mouth fell open as though she had heard something impossibly absurd. "What did you say?" Pei Huaiji stared at her in disbelief, his brows drawn tight. "Gu Qingguan, what little trick are you playing? Are you speaking in sarcasm to provoke me?" In his memory, Gu Qingguan was fiercely possessive and would sulk for half a day if he so much as glanced at a maid from the second branch. Today he had brought a pregnant mistress to seize her authority, yet she had smiled, and even selected an auspicious date herself. "My lord is joking." Gu Qingguan slowly straightened and brushed non-existent dust from her cuff, her expression gentle as a clay bodhisattva's. "Years ago, I injured myself taking a sword thrust meant for my lord, and can no longer bear children for the Pei family. I have always felt deeply guilty. Now that little sister has fulfilled this wish in my place, how could I not rejoice for the Marquis's household?" She raised her eyes and gave Li Jiaojiao a meaningful look. "Little sister is delicate. If my lord believes the ceremony insufficiently grand, I will instruct the accounts office to prepare a full 64 loads of betrothal gifts and welcome her with every honor." Pei Huaiji was completely stunned. He had prepared an entire arsenal of threats, inducements, and accusations about Gu Qingguan's jealousy. Now every word lodged in his throat, impossible to spit out or swallow, turning his cheeks purple. "Do you truly mean that?" Pei Huaiji's tone softened, suspicion and probing in his eyes. "Every word," Gu Qingguan nodded. "Little sister is frail, and standing too long will harm her. My lord should take her back to rest." With that, Gu Qingguan gave them no further glance. She turned and walked directly toward her principal courtyard with her maid, Xiao Tao. Her back was perfectly straight, and every step was steady, watching her leave. Pei Huaiji suddenly felt an empty panic, as though something vitally important was slipping beyond his control. The moment they returned to Qingfeng Court and closed the door, "This servant cannot accept it." Xiao Tao dropped to her knees, her eyes red. "Miss, Li Jiaojiao is nothing but a lowly mistress. Yet because she is pregnant, she dares climb over your head and throw her weight around. The Gu family is rich beyond measure. The master and young masters have even risked everything at court to pave the way for the Marquis. Every bit of his prestige today was built with hundreds of thousands of tales from our family. Now that he has achieved success and recognition, he wants to discard the wife who shared his hardships, and even make his mistress a co-wife. Where is the justice in that?" Xiao Tao wept bitterly, every word spoken in loyal defense of her mistress. Looking at the unharmed Xiao Tao before her, Gu Qingguan felt her eyes grow warm. In her previous life, Xiao Tao had tried to protect Gu Qingguan during her confinement. She was falsely accused, sent to a country estate, tortured, and killed. Gu Qingguan bent down, gently pulled Xiao Tao up, and wiped the tears from her face. Her voice was soft yet cold to the marrow. "Xiao Tao, why cry? Very soon we will not be the ones shedding tears." Xiao Tao froze. "Miss." Gu Qingguan walked to the window and looked at the flourishing crabapple tree in the courtyard. Years ago, to marry her, Pei Huaiji had knelt bare-chested in the snow for 3 days and nights, then travelled 3,000 li on foot to dig it up in the south. The deep devotion of those days now seemed nothing more than the clumsy performance of an impoverished noble seeking to marry into a great merchant family, Xiao Tao. "Remember this." Gu Qingguan turned, a chilling light bursting from her eyes. "The Pei residence may look like the splendid household of Marquis Dingguo, a title inherited through 3 generations, but inside, the old madam's extravagance and Pei Huaiji's incompetence have already hollowed it out. For 5 years, the food and clothing of the first and second branches, the money spent securing favor at court, even the century-old ginseng eaten by the old madam, which one was not paid for from my dowry. They eat the Goe family's flesh and drink its blood, yet despise us as low-born merchants." Xiao Tao sucked in a breath, her face paling. "Miss, you mean, if they find this meal too hard to swallow, then I will overturn the bowl." Gu Qingguan took an engraved bronze key from her sleeve and struck it down on the table. Take my secret letter and quietly leave the residence tomorrow. Find the manager of Hufeng Bank in the south of the city and secretly sell every shop, property and country estate I own in the capital at a reduced price. Exchange the proceeds for bank drafts from major institutions accepted throughout the empire. Do not leave a single cash coin in the capital. Then copy every word of the dowry inventory from when I entered this household and check it against the storerooms. Everything belonging to the Gu family, down to the last needle and thread, will be withdrawn with interest. A fierce light entered Xiao Tao's eyes. She wiped away her tears. This servant understands. I will handle it without leaving the slightest flaw. Everything was arranged in less than half an hour. Suddenly, a commotion sounded outside. The door opened. Li Jiao entered, flanked by two strong maids. She had changed into an ornate padded satin jacket, with glittering gold ornaments filling her hair. Nothing remained of the fragile woman who could barely stand before Pei Huaiji. Elder sister has plenty of leisure. Li Jiao swaggered around the room. Her gaze fell on the rosewood furniture and precious antiques, and she sneered. The Marquis said that since I am carrying the Pei family's child, nothing can be left to chance. Qingfeng Court is the principal courtyard with the best light in the entire residence. Since elder sister is so understanding, perhaps you can suffer a little today and move to the side courtyard in the western corner. Xiao Tao stepped forward in anger. Miss Li, Qingfeng Court belongs to the lawful wife. You have not even entered the household. How dare you behave so arrogantly? Li Jiao's expression hardened as she pointed at Xiao Tao and cursed. Insolent. I carry the unborn blood of the Marquis's household. How dare a lowly maid speak to me that way? Slap. The sharp sound rang through the room, but Li Jiao was the one struck. At some point, Gu Qingguan had moved directly before her, eyes cold as ice, clutching her swollen cheek. Li Jiao fell to the floor and cried in disbelief. You dare strike me. The Marquis cannot bear to lay a single finger on me. Gu Qingguan looked down at her, her voice utterly even. I struck you to teach you the rules of this household. You have neither entered through the door nor been recorded in the family register. Before me, you do not even count as a concubine. Does a mistress need to select an auspicious day to discipline a disobedient servant? You, Li Jiao ground her teeth in hatred. Yet when she met Gu Qingguan's frigid, emotionless eyes, an inexplicable chill entered her heart. Gu Qingguan withdrew her hand and wiped her fingers with a handkerchief, her tone flat. However, since you like Qingfeng Court, you may have it, Xiao Tao. Pack our things. We are moving. Li Jiao froze, believing Gu Qingguan weak and easy to bully. She raised her chin again and drew a heavy ring of keys from her sleeve. At least you know your place. The Marquis said that since you are in poor health, the authority to manage the household finances will also be handed to me. Gu Qingguan looked at the seals and keys representing the financial lifeblood of the household. An icy smile touched her lips. The residence's accounts already showed a deficit of 30,000 taels of silver. Next month, the Ministry of Revenue would begin its intensive inspection of noble families' debts. In her previous life, Gu Qingguan had emptied the Gu family's gold shops to cover the deficit and settle the matter. Now Li Jiao wanted this explosive burden. Let her have it. Very well. Gu Qingguan walked up to Li Jiao and gently placed the keys into her palm. How thoughtful of you, little sister. From now on, the household's property and expenses will depend entirely on you. You must not disappoint the Marquis. With that, Gu Qingguan left the principal courtyard with Xiao Tao without a trace of concern. Behind her, Li Jiao clutched the keys and felt only coldness in her palm, as though she held not limitless authority but a heavy calamity. On the first day after Li Jiao took charge of the household finances, the entire Marquis Dingguo residence descended into chaos. Freed from Gu Qingguan's restrictions, Li Jiao was eager to establish her authority as mistress before everyone in the household. With a stroke of her brush, she ordered every furnishing in the principal courtyard replaced with the finest wood. She refused to wear anything but expensive Suzhou embroidery. To prepare for her wedding as co-wife on the 8th day of the next month, She even ordered thousands of taels worth of jewelry and satin from the capital's most expensive establishment, Huarong House. But the beautiful dream lasted only a few days. One morning, Mr. Liu from the accounts office appeared at the gates of Qingfeng Court with more than a dozen shopkeepers, drenched in sweat, Miss Li disaster. Mr. Liu held an account book, his hands shaking like chaff in a sieve. The silk shop, the jewelry house, and the grain and oil merchants have all come to collect their debts. In our treasury, even counting every last coin, there are fewer than 2,000 taels of silver left. Li Zhaozhao had been reclining on a couch and eating pastries. At his words, she sprang up and struck the table. What nonsense! How can the great residence of Marquis Dingguo fail to produce a few thousand taels? You servants must have embezzled it. Mr. Liu dropped to his knees and wailed in misery. Miss, please judge wisely. For years, the household has relied on the first madam's dowry to cover its deficits. The Marquis's official connections, the old madam's medicinal meals, the second branch's extravagance, which expense did the first madam not pay. Now that you have taken over the household and the first madam has closed her private accounts, the Marquis's residence is nothing but an empty shell. Li Zhaozhao stood frozen, as though struck by lightning. An empty shell. After all her scheming to rise in status, she had won a disaster on the verge of bankruptcy. I don't believe it. Fetch the Marquis. Li Zhaozhao screamed. In the front hall, Pei Huaizhi stared at a mountain of bills, his expression darker than storm clouds. Thousands of taels, how did you spend so much on one wedding? Pei Huaizhi roared, striking the table. Li Zhaozhao wept aggrievedly. My lord, I did it for the household's reputation. If the ceremony were too shabby, outsiders would laugh and say the Marquis wronged his co-wife. Besides, Gu Qingwan spent freely when she managed the household. Why should it be different for me? At the words Gu Qingwan, Pei Huaizhi's chest heaved. Only then did he belatedly realize who had silently supported his lavish spending and influence at court over the past 5 years. A powerful sense of humiliation rose in him, but his pride would never permit him to bow his head. Enough. Pei Huaizhi rubbed his temples and forced himself to continue. Let the debts remain for now. After the wedding on the 8th, I will speak to Qingwan and have her take charge of the household again. In his eyes, Gu Qingwan was only sulking. If he lowered his head, she would certainly use her dowry again to balance his accounts. But an exceptionally vicious light flashed through Li Zhaozhao's eyes. She could never allow Gu Qingwan to regain authority. As long as Gu Qingwan remained in the residence, Li Zhaozhao would always stand beneath her. If Gu Qingwan refused to pay, then it would be better to drive her out completely. Several days later, the minister's residence held a grand banquet. As the lawful wife of Marquis Dingguo, Gu Qingwan claimed illness and did not attend. Pei Huaizhi took the elaborately dressed Li Zhaozhao instead. Late that night, the gates of the Marquis's residence opened. Li Zhaozhao had lost her footing and fallen at the banquet, disturbing her pregnancy. She was carried back in tears. In the side courtyard, Gu Qingwan quietly checked the final bank draft accounts beneath a lamp. Xiao Tao entered and reported in a low voice, Miss, as you instructed, all 17 shops in the capital have been sold. Every tael has been deposited with major banks in Jiangnan and Zhejiangnan. The boat that will take us back to Jiangnan is waiting at the docks. Gu Qingwan closed the account book. Understood, it is time for the play to end. Bang! The gates of the side courtyard were kicked open. Leaning on her cane and surrounded by several maids, the old madam stormed inside with a murderous air. Pei Huaizhi pointed at Gu Qingwan with blood-red eyes and roared. Gu Qingwan, Zhao Zhao was frightened at the minister's banquet and her pregnancy was endangered. Yet you dare sit here as though nothing happened. Gu Qingwan rose, utterly calm. My lord speaks wildly. Which household rule have I broken? Li Zhaozhao was carried in on a stretcher, her face pale as she wept pitifully. Elder sister, I know you hate me for stealing the Marquis's favor, but you cannot secretly order your maid to mix harmful camphor into the incense I burn to protect my pregnancy. Had it not been discovered in time, how would my child have been endangered? The old madam struck her cane heavily against the floor. Gu Qingwan, you are childless and jealous, and now you have harmed the heir of the Marquise's household. Search the place, turn this side courtyard upside down. Several maids immediately charged inside, trampling and smashing everything. In moments, a steward ran out holding a wooden box and shouted, "We found it." It was beneath that maid Xiaotao's bedding. The lid opened to reveal a packet of unused incense and a curse written with Li Jiaojiao's birth characters. "The evidence is irrefutable," the old madam shouted. "What can you say now?" Coldness burst from Pei Huaiji's eyes as he pointed at Xiaotao. "A wicked mistress always has a wicked servant. Men, give this wretch 30 strokes and expel her from the residence. As for Gu Qingguan," he stared fixedly at Gu Qingguan, "you will surrender every household seal, lose your authority as mistress, and copy the sutras 100 times in the family shrine." From the stretcher, calculation flashed through Li Jiaojiao's eyes. Once, she pinned the crime on Xiaotao and destroyed Gu Qingguan's reputation. The Marquis's residence would belong entirely to her. "Wait," a cool voice cut through the uproar. Gu Qingguan showed no panic. Instead, she elegantly smoothed the corner of her robe and walked through the wreckage to the wooden box. She raised her head and looked directly at Pei Huaiji with clear, star-bright eyes and icy, mocking smile on her lips. "My lord calls this irrefutable evidence. Then allow me to ask something." Gu Qingguan reached out and pinched the packet of incense between her fingertips. "This incense is called Snao Crowned Fragrance. It comes from the western regions and costs 50 taels an ounce. Xiaotao earns only 800 cash a month. How could she afford something so precious?" The old madam's expression changed slightly. Gu Qingguan then looked at the so-called curse paper. "The cinnabar seal on this yellow paper belongs to Siyu Nunnery outside the city. By remarkable coincidence, 3 days ago, little sister Li sent her personal maid there to pray for blessings. Mr. Liu in the accounts office still has the receipt for her 30-tael incense donation. Li Jiaojiao, to frame me and monopolize the household's authority, you did not hesitate to use your own body as a wager. You staged this entire scene of a threatened pregnancy and planted evidence against me. Do you take everyone under heaven for fools?" Question after question, the logic airtight and the evidence conclusive. The courtyard fell silent. The servants exchanged looks. The way they regarded Li Jiaojiao changed instantly. As though struck heavily, Pei Huaiji froze. He turned and stared at Li Jiaojiao. "Jiaojiao, is what she said true?" Li Jiaojiao's face turned white with fear. "My lord, no, I did no such thing. Enough." Gu Qingguan ended the fast. From her sleeve, she slowly drew a document prepared in advance and unfolded it before Pei Huaiji. It was a divorce agreement. "Pei Huaiji," Gu Qingguan addressed him by name. No affection remained in her eyes, only endless disgust and indifference. "You coveted the Gu family's wealth and allowed your mistress to slander me. As of today, I have no use for the title of lawful wife in this household. Sign this divorce agreement. From now on, you may marry whom you wish, as may I, and we will have nothing to do with each other." Pei Huaiji stared at the agreement written in black and white. Something collapsed inside him, and an inexplicable terror surged up. "Divorce? No, I won't sign, Qingguan. You cannot leave. You won't sign." Gu Qingguan sneered. She leaned to his ear and spoke slowly in a voice only they could hear. "If you refuse, tomorrow the 30,000 tael debt uncovered by the Ministry of Revenue and the case of Li Jiaojia framing the lawful wife will appear on an imperial censor's desk. By then, the man disgraced, dismissed from office, and stripped of his title will be you, Pei Huaiji Marquis Dingguo." Pei Huaiji's face turned ashen. His hand trembled as he looked at Gu Qingguan's iron-cold eyes. At last he understood that the woman before him was no longer a cloistered wife he could manipulate. Under the shocked gazes of the old madam and Li Jiaojiao, Pei Huaiji stiffly took the brush and signed his name. The moment his fingerprint was pressed onto the document, Gu Qingguan snatched it back, turned without looking behind her, and walked toward the side gate. The Gu family's carriage had been waiting outside for a long time. Carrying their neatly packed luggage, Xiaotao followed Gu Qingguan onto the road home before nightfall. Behind them stood the debt-ridden, chaotic residence of Marquis Dingguo. Ahead lay a reborn life beneath a vast sky. The moon rose over the high pavilions, A red carpet covered the ground before the main gates of the Marquis Dingguo residence, and festive lanterns adorned 10 li of streets. Today was the joyous day when Pei Huaiji, Marquis Dingguo, married Li Jiaojiao as his co-wife. The front hall glittered with gold and overflowed with distinguished guests. Many officials, great and small, came to offer congratulations out of respect for Pei Huaiji's recent rise. Li Jiaojiao sat in the flower hall, supported by maids and dressed in an elaborate red satin bridal robe. A priceless phoenix coronet studded with pearls crowned her head. Through a thin veil, she gazed at the assembled nobles, unable to hide the triumph on her lips. "Congratulations, Miss Li." "Oh, no, we should call you co-wife, Madame Pei, now." Several wives of minor officials beside her hurried to flatter her. The Marquis spared no expense on this wedding. Even the furnishings in this hall are of the finest quality. Li Jiaojiao lifted her chin, filled with pride. So what if that wretch Gu Qingwan had left? The position of mistress over this vast residence, and all its wealth and glory now belonged to Li Jiaojiao. But before she could fully savour her triumph, "Report!" An urgent and deeply ill-timed cry shattered the festive noise in the front hall. Mr. Liu from the accounts office stumbled and crawled into the hall, his face white as if he had just been pulled from the water. He threw himself at Pei Huaiji's feet. "My lord, disaster. Something terrible has happened." Pei Huaiji had been raising a toast to the Vice Minister of Rights. He frowned sharply, his face darkening as he scolded in a low voice. "Insolence! Today is this Marquis's wedding, and every civil and military official is present. What propriety is there in such panic?" Mr. Liu's teeth chattered, pointing outside. He trembled violently. "No, my lord. Outside, dozens of merchants have gathered. The silk shop, jewelry house, restaurants, and even the master of the Yuefu music troupe have brought people and completely blocked our gates." Every conversation in the hall abruptly stopped. The guests exchanged looks, and several officials from the censorate raised their brows. Pei Huaiji's humiliation showed through gritted teeth. He lowered his voice. "What nonsense! It is merely a few outstanding balances. Have them collect the money from the accounts office. Why come shouting in the front hall? They cannot collect it." Before all the guests, Mr. Liu wailed through tears. "Miss Li used every tael in the treasury in advance to pay for this wedding. There is not even 10 taels left in the accounts office. Those shopkeepers just heard that the first madam left the capital with a divorce agreement. Knowing no one will advance money for the residents from now on, they panicked and insist that the full 32,000 taels owed by the household over the past 3 years be paid today." "What 30,000 taels? The great Marquis Dingguo owes merchants that much silver, and it was all subsidized by his former wife's dowry. Good heavens, I just heard that the first madam divorced him in fury and left the capital. So this residence is merely an empty shell supported by a merchant's daughter." Buzzing discussion erupted among the guests. The officials who had come to flatter Pei Huaiji instantly looked at him with contempt instead. Several upright censors even began making notes on memorials hidden in their sleeves: a meritorious noble living extravagantly, refusing to repay debts, and taking a new wife without properly dismissing the first. What a disgrace to his family. Pei Huaiji's head rang. His cheeks burned as though he had been slapped dozens of times before the crowd. Bastard, enraged, Pei Huaiji seized Mr. Liu by the collar. "When Qingwan managed the household, when did the accounts ever lack money? Why did you not report this to me sooner?" Mr. Liu looked deeply wronged. "My lord, please judge wisely. When the first madam managed the household, she used income from her private shops every month to cover expenses. She was gentle and never troubled you with so much as half a concern. But now, she has withdrawn all her private funds and sold every asset under her name. The Marquis's own holdings lose money year after year. They are a bottomless pit." Boom, the words exploded through Pei Huaiji's mind like thunder. She had withdrawn every private fund, sold everything. Only then did he remember Gu Qingquan sitting beneath the cold lamp in the side courtyard several nights earlier, her eyes far too calm. She had not been sulking. She truly had left him no path back and no lingering affection. "My lord." Li Jiaojiao hurried from the rear hall, lifting her skirts, her face livid. "What is happening?" Have those lowly merchants driven away at once. All the guests are watching. Get out of my way. Pei Huaiji shoved Li Jiao aside. Her phoenix coronet swayed as she fell awkwardly to the floor, drawing startled cries and mocking laughter from the guests. Pei Huaiji ignored her. Like a madman, he raced toward Qingfeng Court Qingwan Gu Qingwan. He crashed through the courtyard gates, but only deathly silence met his eyes. The bedchamber, once filled with precious porcelain and warm brocade, had been cleaned out completely. Other than an old wooden table that had belonged to the residents, everything Gu Qingguan brought, even the smallest painting or incense burner, was gone. Even the envelope containing their tokens of love, once buried beneath the crabapple tree he had personally transplanted, had been dug up. Only a pit of freshly turned black earth remained. The faint sandalwood fragrance he had known for 5 years had vanished from the air. How could this happen? How could this happen? Pei Huaiji staggered half a step back and leaned against the cold door frame, eyes red and breath ragged. It felt as though a blunt knife twisted through his heart, causing so much pain he could barely stand. Only then did he realize with perfect clarity Gu Qingguan, who once had eyes only for him and would even have given her life for him, had truly abandoned him completely. "My lord, disaster." A servant ran inside, panting. "The merchants are causing a riot outside." When the old madam heard the news, she fainted in the rear hall. Pei Huaiji collapsed to the floor. As he stared at the empty room, a tear of deepest regret finally slipped from the corner of his eye. "I was wrong, Qingguan. I truly was wrong," he muttered, his voice as hoarse as a ghost's. 1,000 miles from the chaos in the Marquis Dingguo residence, a gentle rain was falling over a waterside town in Jiangnan. A black awning boat cut across the clear water and slowly docked before the grand, solemn gatehouse of the Gu residence, supported by Xiaotao. Gu Qingguan climbed the steps. Just as she reached the entrance, the heavy vermilion gates opened with a crash from within. "Wana," a choked voice sounded. Madame Gu's eyes were already swollen from crying. Before Gu Qingguan could bow, she rushed forward and pulled her daughter tightly into her arms. "My child, you have suffered. You endured 5 full years in that den of wolves." Madame Gu patted her daughter's back as tears poured down her face, behind her. Gu Qingguan's broad-shouldered father did not cry, but his usually stern eyes were red. Her grandparents stood beneath the covered walkway with their canes, beckoning repeatedly. "It is good that you are home. The Gu family's precious daughter has no reason to slave for a ruined noble household." Elder sister, a graceful girl of 14 or 15, flew toward her like a joyous swallow and wrapped her arms tightly around Gu Qingguan's waist. "Elder sister is finally home. Let us see who dares bully her from now on." The girl was Gu Qingguan's younger sister, Gu Qingxie. Her eyes were innocent and filled with devotion to her sister. Seeing her loved ones untouched by the misery of her previous life and hearing their heartfelt concern, Gu Qingguan's eyes grew warm. The cold and darkness accumulated over 2 lifetimes, melted beneath their love. She took a deep breath and smiled. Father, mother, grandfather, grandmother, Shui Qingguan is home. That evening, the Gu residents held a grand feast. The table was covered with Gu Qingguan's favorite Jiangnan dishes from childhood. Father did not reproach her for shaming the family through divorce. Instead, he personally poured her a cup of warmed yellow wine. "Wana, do whatever you wish. I have deposited the 420,000 taels from your sales with Jiangnan's largest merchant bank. From now on, if you wish to take charge of the Gu family business, the decision is entirely yours." That night, Gu Qingguan slept more sweetly than she had in years. There were no bone-chilling nightmares of the cold palace, only the patter of rain outside and the warmth of her bedding. Over the next half-month, Gu Qingguan swiftly took charge of the Gu Xiu family's grain and silk businesses in Jiangnan with astonishing skill. Through decisive management and a keen sense of political trends, she expanded the family holdings by 1/3 in only a few days. Her fame, exceptional beauty, and immense fortune drew so many talented young men seeking marriage that they nearly wore down the threshold of the Gu residence. Gu Qingguan politely refused them all. In this life, she would live only for herself and her family, never for romance again. Then came a rainy night half a month later. Before any letter could arrive from the capital, A distraught figure traveled 2,000 li and staggered to the gates of Iju residence. Qingguan, come out and see me. The voice was as hoarse as a broken gong. Outside, Pei Huaiji wore an old robe caked with mud. His face was pale, his eyes sunken, and nothing remained of Marquis Dingguo's former arrogance or majesty. To pay the debts, he had been forced to sell every antique painting and treasure left by his ancestors. Censors had even impeached him, causing the rank of the Marquis Dingguo title to be reduced. Li Jiaozhao hemorrhaged after giving birth to a daughter and permanently lost the ability to bear children. Every day, she raved and caused scenes in the residence. At last, Pei Huaiji could bear no more. He madly missed Gu Qingguan's goodness, her gentle smile, and the orderly residence she had managed. Like a madman, he raced to Jiangnan without stopping. Thud! Pei Huaiji dropped to his knees on the flagstone road outside the Gaigu residence. Cold rain soaked him as he begged loudly. Qingguan, I know I was wrong. I truly know it. Please come out and see me once. He knelt there for an entire day and night. On the third morning, the rain was still falling. The gates of the Gu residence slowly opened. A slender figure emerged at an unhurried pace beneath a green bamboo oil paper umbrella. Wild delight suddenly blazed in Pei Huaiji's dull eyes. Ignoring the numbness in his legs, he shuffled forward on his knees and reached for the hem of Gu Qingguan's skirt. Qingguan, you finally agreed to see me. You still have me in your heart, don't you? Gu Qingguan stepped back slightly. The umbrella hid her face, revealing only lips as cool as frost. Pei Huaiji, why are you humiliating yourself here and tarnishing the Gu family's reputation? What do you want? Pei Huaiji looked up, tears and rain streaming together as he begged through sobs. Qingguan, come back to the capital with me. The divorce agreement was never registered with the authorities. You are still my wife. I have decided everything. If you return, I will immediately demote Li Jiaozhao to a lowly concubine. I will enter her daughter under your name, and you may raise the child to support you in old age and mourn you when you die. If only you return, I will hand all household authority to you. I swear I will never take another concubine. Please, please save me, save the Pei family. Hearing these utterly shameless promises, Gu Qingguan laughed softly. The sound was especially jarring and mocking through the rain. Have another woman bear a child for me. Enter her under my name. Gu Qingguan slowly crouched, holding the bamboo handle of her oil paper umbrella in her slender fingers. She looked coldly down at the man. Pei Huaiji, do you believe every woman under heaven should revolve around preserving the Pei family line? You are not begging me to return because you love me. You are begging because everyone in the Marquis Dingguo residence is about to starve. Because you need the Gu family's silver to fill the enormous hole you created. Pei Huaiji's face was white as paper, his lips trembling. No, that is not true. I truly love. Gu Qingguan rose and looked down at him, shattering his final illusion. Pei Huaiji, from the moment you chose to elevate Li Jiaozhao and demote me to a concubine, you became a dead man in my eyes. In this life, I, Gu Qingguan, will never look back at the muck in a foul gutter. The instant she finished, a shrill stream of curses came from the street corner. Pei Huaiji, you heartless bastard, you abandoned our daughter and me to come to Jiangnan for this wretch. A bedraggled Li Jiaozhao rushed through the downpour carrying a swaddled infant. She threw herself at Pei Huaiji, striking and clawing him. My lord, the old madam is dying. The creditors have smashed the gates of the residence. Yet you are kneeling here begging her. Pummeled into a sorry state, Pei Huaiji irritably shoved Li Jiaozhao into the mud. The baby's piercing cries, Li Jiaozhao's shrewish curses, and Pei Huaiji's despairing roars blended into a farce of unparalleled absurdity. Gu Qingguan watched quietly. The two villains who had driven her into the abyss in her previous life now tore at each other like dogs in the mud, consumed by mutual hatred. She withdrew her gaze without another glance, turned and entered the Gu residence. Close the gates. Gu Qingguan's cool voice sounded from within. Boom, the heavy vermilion gates slammed shut, sealing out the screams, wind and rain. 3 days later, Gu Qingguan heard that Pei Huaiji had fallen gravely ill in Jiangnan and was eventually carried back to the capital by his servants. The capital and Jiangnan had long since become two different worlds, buried beneath immense commercial debts and deprived of its Zhu family source of wealth. The Marquis Dingguo residence had become the greatest joke in the capital. To fill the deficit, Pei Huaiji was forced to marry the daughter of a newly rich salt merchant as his second wife, fierce and shrewish. The woman slapped Li Jiajia the moment she entered and drove her into a broken woodshed beside the pigsty, where she beat and cursed her daily. The Marquis's residence was full of concubines and endless turmoil. The clamour of daily abuse never ceased, and the old madam died of rage. 1,000 miles away in Jiangnan, however, Gu Qingguan's name was known throughout the land. In the second month of spring, drums and music rang before the Jiangnan Governor-General's residence. Gu Qingguan wore a deep purple brocade robe patterned in dark gold, her black hair held by a single mutton-fat jade hairpin. Calm and noble, she stood beneath a golden plaque and received the emperor's own inscription, "For most imperial merchant under heaven." In her previous life, the Guye family had been wealthy but trapped by its status as low-born merchants, leaving it at the mercy of ruined nobles like Pei Huaiji. In this life, Gu Qingguan sold every outdated holding in the capital and invested all 420,000 taels in Jiangnan tribute silk and military grain transport. Drawing on her knowledge of the previous life's political landscape, she correctly predicted the Northwestern Victory's supply need. She not only won strong support from the Ministry of Revenue, but also secured exclusive rights to provide imperial tribute goods for 3 to 5 years. The Gu family's properties and trading houses now stretched from Jiangnan to the gates of the capital. Eldest Miss Xiaotao now wore the crisp clothes of a shop manager. She handed over a secret letter and lowered her voice. News from the capital says Pei Huaiji's eyes turned red with panic when he heard we secured the imperial tribute silk contract. Oh, Gu Qingguan lifted her teacup and skimmed the foam unhurriedly. What new death wish has he found? Xiaotao sneered. He has attached himself to a deputy official at the Ministry of Revenue. When he learned our silk fleet would travel to the capital through the Grand Canal, he secretly instructed the canal inspector to detain all 30 of our merchant ships. Pei Huaiji has announced that he will release the fleet only if you personally return to the Marquis's residence in the capital, apologize, and beg him to use his connections. Otherwise, he will detain us for substandard goods until we miss the auspicious tribute delivery date, leaving the Gu family guilty of delaying imperial tribute and deceiving the sovereign. Gu Qingguan's father, who was working on accounts nearby, struck the table in fury. Shameless whelp, he abuses public authority for private revenge and uses such vile methods to threaten Wana. Instead of growing angry, Gu Qingguan's lips curved into an amused, cold smile, using official power to crush her. Pei Huaiji, did you truly believe you were still the mighty Marquis Dingguo of old? Father, there is no need to worry. Gu Qingguan set down her teacup. The clear chime of porcelain rang through the hall. What he detained is not ordinary merchandise. It is the 100 longevity brocade for the Empress Dowager's 60th birthday. He dares detain imperial tribute. He is courting death. Gu Qingguan rose, a cold light flashing in her eyes. Saddle the horses. This manager will personally visit the canal checkpoint. This time I will knock the official cap from Pei Huaiji's head for good. 3 days later at the Grand Canal checkpoint, wind and waves battered 30 enormous merchant ships flying banners marked G, all chained tightly to the docks. Canal Inspector Zhang sat aboard a pleasure barge, exchanging toasts with Pei Huaiji, who wore plain clothes but forced himself to appear calm. Brother Pei, rest assured. Lord Zhang slapped his chest and laughed. Without my approval, not even a fly from these 30 ships will reach the capital. That Gu woman is merely a female merchant. She will not withstand the pressure. Once she returns to the capital and bows her head to beg you, you may do whatever you like with her. Holding his wine cup, Pei Huaiji's eyes flashed with warped fervour and greed. These days his fierce second wife beat him black and blue at home, while colleagues ostracized him at court. Every moment he longed for the prestige he had enjoyed when Gu Qingguan was beside him. As long as he detained this shipment, Gu Qingguan would have to return and serve him to save the Gu family's 100 lives. Then he could reclaim not only the 420,000 taels, but all his former pride. Many thanks, brother Zhang, Pei Huaiji said through gritted teeth. When that poisonous woman arrives, I will make her kneel, kowtow, and admit her wrongs. Before the last word left his mouth, boom, A deafening cannon blast erupted across the docks. Hundreds of Imperial guards in golden armor surged in from both sides, instantly surrounding the pleasure barge and the inspector's office. An Imperial decree, a sharp, majestic eunuch's voice pierced the clouds. The chief eunuch serving the powerful Empress Dowager strode onto the pleasure barge with a yellow silk decree, guarded by hundreds of Imperial experts. Beside him stood Gu Qingguan in purple robes, her presence overwhelming as she looked coldly at the two ashen men inside. How can this be Imperial guards? Lord Zhang dropped his wine cup, shattering it on the floor. Pei Huaizhi looked as though he had been struck by lightning. He stared at Gu Qingguan above him as his legs shook uncontrollably. The chief eunuch snorted, unfurled the decree, and spoke in a thunderous voice. By the mandate of heaven, the Emperor decrees, Pei Huaizhi, Marquis Dingguo and Zhongda, Canal Inspector, have acted with outrageous audacity. They privately detained the 100 longevity tribute silk for the Empress Dowager's birthday and attempted to delay the grand ceremony, an offence equivalent to treason. They are to be imprisoned immediately and jointly investigated by the Ministry of Justice and the embroidered uniform guard. What treason? Pei Huaizhi's vision went black, and he collapsed heavily to the floor. He stared at Gu Qingguan in disbelief and screamed in despair. Gu Qingguan, you framed me. I am a marquis. How dare you treat me this way? Gu Qingguan walked down to him and lowered her oil paper umbrella, a cold curve touching her lips. Pei Huaizhi, I did not frame you. Your contemptible pride personally delivered you to a dead end. You tried to crush me with official authority. What a pity now, in my eyes. You are worth less than a dog. The Imperial guards surged forward, pinned the screaming, struggling Pei Huaizhi to the ground like a dead dog, wrenched his joints behind him, and dragged him roughly into a prison cart. The Ministry of Justice prison in the capital. The dark, damp death row reeked of nauseating mildew, dressed in filthy prison clothes. Pei Huaizhi huddled with dishevelled hair on a pile of straw. In only 5 days he had fallen from a glorious marquis to a prisoner. The iron door creaked open. A ray of sunlight entered, accompanied by steady footsteps. Dressed in magnificent robes, Gu Qingguan slowly entered death row with the Minister of Justice and the commander of the embroidered uniform guard. The moment he saw Gu Qingguan, Pei Huaizhi lunged madly at the iron bars. He clutched them with both hands, his eyes blood-red. Qingguan, save me. I know I was wrong. Inspector Zhang used me. The affection of one day as husband and wife should last 100. For the sake of all our years together, beg the Empress Dowager to spare my life. If I get out, I will give you every property belonging to the Marquis's residence. I will make you my lawful wife. I will sell Li Jiaojiao and her daughter into the lowest brothel. At Pei Huaizhi's frenzied words, without the slightest moral limit, the Minister of Justice showed utter contempt. Gu Qingguan looked at him quietly, her eyes as still as if she were regarding a heap of stinking garbage. Pei Huaizhi, Gu Qingguan said coolly, do you believe you fell to this state merely because you detained imperial tribute? Pei Huaizhi froze. What do you mean? Gu Qingguan drew a yellowed account book from her sleeve and handed it to the commander beside her. Commander, these are the true itemized accounts showing that 5 years ago, while serving in the Ministry of Revenue, Pei Huaizhi embezzled 300,000 taels in compensation and military pay for the 3 northwestern armies. To balance the accounts, he tried to substitute inferior padded uniforms, unable to stand by. The Gourvier family secretly used 300,000 taels from my private dowry to cover the deficit and preserve his official position. But I kept the original promissory notes and embezzlement ledger bearing his handwritten signature and fingerprint. Boom. The words struck Pei Huaizhi like a devastating thunderbolt, destroying his last hope. Embezzling military funds, colluding with the enemy and deceiving the emperor. These were crimes punishable by confiscation, extermination of the household, and implication of all 9 kinship groups. Gu Qingguan. Pei Huaizhi gave a piercing roar. The corners of his eyes split, shedding tears of blood. You have plotted against me for 5 years. You poisonous woman. You will die a horrible death. Gu Qingguan bent down with a sneer and looked at his face twisted by despair. I plotted against you. If you were not greedy and hypocritical to the core, if in my previous life you had not driven the Guyu family into ruin, how could you face this retribution today? Pei Huaiji. This ledger is the first blood debt I am collecting from you for the 77 members of the GU family. With that, Gu Qingguan turned sharply and swept away without another glance. 3 days later, a public proclamation was made outside the Meridian Gate. The emperor was furious. Pei Huaiji, Marquis Dingguo, was convicted of multiple crimes, embezzling military pay, detaining imperial tribute, and deceiving the sovereign. The emperor decreed that the Marquis Dingguo title be stripped, every asset of the household confiscated, and Pei Huaiji given the severest punishment, exile to the bitterly cold northwest for hard labor, never to enter the capital again. The decree shook the capital. On the day the embroidered uniform guards searched the residence, the entire street filled with spectators. The once crowded gates of the Marquis Dingguo residence were sealed with heavy strips of paper. To seize the last pieces of gold jewelry, the fierce salt merchant's daughter, who had become second wife, and Li Jiaozhao, clawed each other's hair and brawled in public outside the gates. Li Jiaozhao's clothes were torn to shreds, her head split and bleeding. Clutching her screaming child, she rolled through the mud like a madwoman. I am the co-wife. I am the mistress of this household. You cannot confiscate my home. Li Jiaozhao shrieked. A member of the embroidered uniform guard sneered and kicked her away. The Marquis's household no longer exists. What damned mistress? Enter them all into the low-born register and sell them through the authorities. At the street corner, the curtain of an ornate sedan lifted slightly. Gu Qingguan sat inside, quietly watching the splendid spectacle of dogs tearing at one another. As the runners dragged Li Jiaozhao away like a dead pig, she caught sight of Gu Qingguan inside the sedan. At that moment, boundless regret and despair erupted in Li Jiaozhao's eyes. What she had schemed so hard to steal was nothing more than an illusion. Gu Qingguan, whom she had envied and framed, now stood in the clouds like a goddess beyond their reach for the rest of their lives. Let us go. Gu Qingguan lowered the curtain, her voice as calm as water. Yes, eldest miss. The sedan slowly rose. Morning sunlight covered the broad avenue as the rotten, declining Marquis's residence disappeared behind her. Her enemies were destroyed, and her family and country were secure. The finest scenery of this world was only beginning. To all my rational thinkers, this round ends with cause and effect brought full circle. Gu Qingguan's entire reversal can be summed up in one sentence. She did not fight for ownership, she transferred the initiative. You thought you were forcing me to stay, but you were actually giving me a reason to leave. Next, let us hear another story. On the night my husband married a co-wife, my mother-in-law ordered 30 guards to surround my courtyard. She declared, anyone who comes out to ruin the celebration will be killed on the spot. I would like to see what she thinks she can do, smugly. She sent her son into the bridal chamber and left me alone in an empty room. But I was unusually calm. I did nothing and quietly waited for dawn. The next day, when the Imperial Household Department appeared at the residence, my husband's entire family was dumbfounded. This time, I remained silent because I intended to ensure that none of them ever recovered. The clamor of music surged from the front courtyard in piercing waves. Every young maid in my courtyard fidgeted anxiously, faces pale. Wang Kui entered with a cup of tea, her eyes red. Miss, have some hot tea. She placed the cup beside my hand, her voice trembling. They have gone too far. Why don't we go to the front courtyard and confront them? I did not move. I merely gazed quietly at the thin, withered scholar tree outside the window. Beyond the courtyard gate, disordered footsteps drew closer, accompanied by the clear clink of metal. I pushed open the window. Cold wind poured inside. 30 armored guards carrying sabers stood throughout the narrow lane, leading to my courtyard, hands resting on their hilts. Like a cold wall of men, they sealed every way out. Their leader was Maggie Liu, who served my mother-in-law. Hands on her hips, her fat body blocked the entrance like a ferocious door god. The Duchess has issued an order. Her shrill voice tore through the night. No member of Madame Sue's courtyard may take a single step beyond these gates. Anyone who comes out to ruin the heir's wedding celebration will be killed on the spot. I would like to see what Su Mingyuan thinks she can do. The young maids serving in the courtyard drew in their necks and huddled together, trembling. Whispers sounded among them. They are the family's private guards. I heard every one of them has blood on his hands. The old madam truly means it this time. She is afraid madam will make a scene. Wankui trembled with anger, her cheeks scarlet. This is intolerable. I will fight them. She lifted her skirt and started outside. Stop. At last I spoke, my voice perfectly calm. Wankui halted and looked back at me. Her eyes filled with unwillingness and tears. Miss. Close the gate. But they close it. Wankui bit her lip as tears fell one by one, but obediently walked over, shut the heavy courtyard gate, and slid the bolt into place. The world became half as loud, yet the commotion from the front courtyard reached its peak. The guests' congratulations, servants' cries for rewards, and music from strings and flutes blended into a vast net enclosing my small courtyard. Congratulations, old madam. Congratulations, young lord. The new madam is a peerless beauty. She and the young lord are a match made in heaven. A glib voice rang loudly. Even through several walls and courtyards it reached my ears clearly. Old madam, on such a joyous day, why has Madame Sue, the lawful wife, not appeared to offer greetings? Is she unwell? I heard my mother-in-law, old Madame Shen, give her characteristic harsh sneer. Why mention something unfit to appear in public? Her greatest contribution to the Shen family is to stay quietly in her courtyard and not come out to embarrass herself. Pay her no attention. Bang, unable to restrain herself, Wankui struck the table with her fist. The teacup jumped, spilling tea over her hand. She dropped to her knees at my feet, weeping. Miss, listen to them. Are those even the words of human beings? Without our Duke Jingguo household, how could their Duke Jingguo household have what it does today? They swallowed the Su family fortune, caused the master's death, forced you to marry into this family and suffer endlessly, and now they humiliate you like this. My dear miss, how much pain are you carrying inside? I reached out and gently patted her trembling back. Her tears were burning hot. Wankui, bring me the locked Namu chest beneath my bed. Wankui paused, then nodded through her tears and dragged the heavy chest out. The chest was old, but its brass lock was new and gleamed coldly in the candlelight. I took out the key and opened it. There was a soft click. The chest held no gold, silver, jewels, silk, or satin, only orderly stacks of letters and account books. At the top lay a yellowed secret letter wrapped in oiled paper. It was the last letter my father sent back to the capital by urgent courier before he died in battle. I drew it out and gently traced the writing with my fingers. To Brother Shen. The military situation in the northwest has changed. Our grain supply has been severed. I fear there is a traitor among us. My father's handwriting was vigorous and forceful, just as he had been. I placed the letter beside another stack. Over the past 3 years, I had made rubbings, one by one, of Shen Wei's correspondence from his study. Most of the 2 sets of handwriting matched. This so-called Brother Shen. My father's sworn brother Shen Wei, Duke Jingguo, had colluded with the enemy for military credit and the Su family fortune. He betrayed my father's marching route and embezzled the military pay issued by the court. As a result, my father and 30,000 Su family soldiers died with unquiet souls in the northwest. I carefully returned the letter to its oiled paper wrapper, then placed it back inside the chest. Hide the chest well. Yes, miss. Wankui stopped crying. Her eyes were filled with awe and concern as she looked at me. Bang, bang. 3 celebratory cannon blasts sounded from the front courtyard. The new couple was bowing in the wedding ceremony. I returned to the window and sat down. I poured myself a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Bitterness spread across my tongue. I drank slowly, 1 sip at a time, without the slightest expression. 2 furtive heads appeared above the wall. They belonged to 2 of the guards. Look, that woman is just sitting there drinking tea. She hasn't moved at all. Perhaps she's frightened senseless. With 30 armed guards around her, what can one weak woman do? I thought we would see a fine spectacle today. I didn't expect her to accept her fate so quickly. Better that she does. If she behaves and stays an ornament, everyone can rest easy. Their teasing voices drifted lightly into the courtyard and dispersed on the wind. I ignored them. Time passed little by little. The 3rd watch arrived. At last, The noise from the front courtyard gradually faded. Wang Kui remained beside me, her head dipping as she dozed. I raised my head and looked at the cold moon outside. My heart was utterly still. I knew that the calmer this place remained tonight, the more terrible the fate of the Duke Zhengguo household would be tomorrow. The real show had only begun. The sky had barely begun to brighten when thunderous pounding struck the courtyard gate. Open up, Madame Su, get out of bed. Nanny Liu's duck-like voice called from outside again. The new madam is coming to serve you tea. Stop dawdling and making the old madam and young lord wait. Startled awake, Wang Kui rubbed her eyes and rose. The moment she heard the commotion, every trace of sleep vanished, fire nearly erupted from her eyes. Those bastards, will they never stop? She rushed to the gate, pulled back the bolt and shouted at Nanny Liu. Nanny Liu, do you understand the rules? By custom, a co-wife's tea ceremony must be announced 3 days in advance. Who comes pounding at the gate before dawn? Slap, a sharp strike sounded. Wang Kui staggered from the blow and 5 scarlet fingerprints immediately appeared on her pale cheek. Nanny Liu withdrew her hand and spat. Rules in the Duke Zhengguo household. The old madam is the rule. What do you think you are lecturing me about rules? Say one more word and I will tear your mouth apart. She pointed at Wang Kui, then looked into the courtyard. Su Mingyuan, I warn you not to reject the face we give you. Get dressed and come out. If you delay the auspicious hour and make the new madam unhappy, you will suffer for it. Hearing the commotion, I emerged from the inner room. I wore only a thin nightgown, miss. Wang Kui held her cheek. Tears filled her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. I walked to her and gently helped her up. My gaze settled on Nanny Liu's smug face. I said nothing. I merely looked at her. My stare made Nanny Liu uneasy. Blustering to hide her fear, she shouted, "What are you looking at?" "Go change your clothes." I withdrew my gaze and returned inside. Wang Kui, dress me, miss. Formal robes, Wang Kui understood. She wiped away her tears and swiftly arranged my hair and clothing. 15 minutes later, I sat in the place of honor in the hall, wearing the formal scarlet robes of a lawful wife and a 9-pheasant phoenix hairpin. Before long, footsteps approached. Old Madame Shen entered first, flanked by 2 maids. Behind her came my husband, Shen Yan, and his newly installed co-wife, Liu Rumei. Liu Rumei wore a peach-red jacket patterned with twining branches and a full set of red gold and ruby ornaments. The treasured set old Madame Shen had kept locked away. Those ornaments should have passed to the lawful wife clinging to Shen Yan's arm. Liu Rumei could not hide her triumph or provocation. She looked at me with the boastfulness of a victor. Old Madame Shen sat in the grand armchair beside the place of honor, lifted her tea, and blew across it slowly. "Mingyuan, now that Rumei has entered the household, you are sisters. You must live in harmony, understand?" I did not look at her. My gaze fell on Shen Yan. He also wore a festive red robe, making his face look as smooth and handsome as fine jade. But the eyes once filled with affection for me now held only impatience and evasion. He did not even dare meet my gaze. What a coward, guided by a maid. Liu Rumei carried a cup of tea gracefully toward me. "Elder sister, please have some tea." Her delicate voice was sickeningly sweet. I did not reach for the cup. She was not angry. The sweet smile remained on her face. Just as she extended the cup to me, her wrist suddenly tilted. Splash! The entire cup of scalding tea spilled over my skirt. A dark stain quickly spread across the scarlet brocade. The boiling liquid soaked through several layers of clothing and burned my skin. "Oh!" Liu Rumei cried theatrically. She hurried back several steps and pretended to wipe non-existent droplets from her hand. "I'm sorry, elder sister. I'm sorry. This is my first time serving you tea. I was so nervous that my hand slipped. I did not mean it." She apologized aloud, but triumph nearly overflowed from her eyes. Old Madame Shen did not even bother to conceal herself and laughed openly. "Oh, Rumei is simply an honest child. Mingyuan, as the lawful wife, you must be magnanimous. Do not make trouble for a newcomer." At last, Shen Yan deigned to speak, but to me. He frowned, his tone filled with reproach. "So Mingyuan, if you do not want to receive her courtesy, say so. Why keep treating Rumei with a cold face? She has just entered the household and understands nothing. Can you not show her some consideration?" I laughed. What an enormous joke for the sake of a concubine who had just entered. My husband accused his humiliated lawful wife of lacking magnanimity and consideration. I lifted my handkerchief and slowly wiped the tea from my skirt. The burned skin stung fiercely. I raised my eyes past them and looked directly at old Madame Shen above. "Mother-in-law." My voice was soft, yet everyone present fell silent. "Are you truly certain you want to let her enter this household and establish herself as co-wife?" Old Madame Shen's face darkened, and she struck her cup heavily against the table. "Insolence." "Su Mingyuan, what do you mean? Are you threatening me?" "I tell you the Shen family has accepted Ru Mei as co-wife. Do you dare defy me?" Watching her fly into a rage, my smile deepened. I did not answer. My silence seemed to give Lu Rumei even more courage. She stepped forward and deliberately extended a hand wearing a jade bracelet before me as she adjusted her hair. "Elder sister, do you think this bracelet is beautiful?" The old madam specially gave it to me and said it was the finest mutton fat jade. The bracelet was lustrous and flawless. Of course I recognized it. It was the only keepsake my mother left me and the dowry item I treasured most. Several days earlier, I discovered it missing. I searched the entire courtyard but could not find it. So old Madame Shen, that executioner, had taken it and rewarded it to the woman usurping my place. Unable to endure more, Wang Kui rushed forward and pointed at Liu Rumei's wrist. "You, that belongs to our miss." Old Madame Shen glared and shouted, "Silence, ill-mannered servant. What is this talk of hers and mine? Su Mingyuan married into the Shen family. She and everything she owns belong to us. The Shen family may give its possessions to whomever it wishes. What right has a servant to speak? Men, drag out this insubordinate wretch and slap her 20 times. I would like to see who dares," I said coldly. My gaze stopped the two old maids who had stepped forward. I looked at old Madame Shen, Shen Yan, and Liu Rumei. The three echoed one another as though performing a brilliant play, and I was merely the prop beneath their feet, used for their amusement. What an interesting family. They fed on the Su family's flesh and blood while behaving like benefactors. I was about to speak and end the farce completely when a servant's panicked report came from outside the courtyard. Old Madam Disaster. Chief Steward Li from the Imperial Household Department is here. He brought many officers and has already reached the front courtyard. He says he has an imperial decree. Every master of the household must receive it. What? Old Madame Shen shot to her feet. The triumph froze on Liu Rumei's face. Shen Yan's expression also changed. They had arrived. The person I had waited for was finally here. Old Madame Shen's panic lasted only an instant before turning into wild delight. The Imperial Household Department. Chief Steward Li Zhong. She adjusted her robes, smiling so widely that every wrinkle opened. "Oh, His Majesty must have learned that our Yana married the minister's daughter and sent someone with rewards. I knew it. The alliance between the Shen and Liu families is a union of strength. His Majesty must reward us." She grew more delighted with every word and turned to urge Shen Yan and Liu Rumei forward. "Yana, Rumei, why are you still standing there? Quickly come receive the decree in the front courtyard. What an immense honor. The Shen family will rise even higher." Liu Rumei also recovered. Her smile returned and she affectionately linked her arm through old Madame Shen's. Mother is truly far-sighted. Relief also appeared on Shen Yan's face. Before leaving, old Madame Shen did not forget to glare viciously at me. "You will come too. Do not think I do not know what you are planning. Behave yourself and do not play any tricks behind us. Otherwise you will suffer." I nodded obediently and followed them toward the front at an unhurried pace. The wet patch of my skirt clung coldly and unpleasantly to my leg, but my mood had never been better. The moment we entered the front courtyard, we saw Li Zhong standing in the center with more than a dozen officers in Imperial Household Department uniforms, all wearing grave expressions. Each carried a saber at his waist and looked cold and severe. They did not resemble men bringing rewards. The atmosphere in the courtyard was terrifyingly heavy. Old Madame Shen's smile stiffened, but she forced herself to approach. "Oh, Chief Steward Li, forgive us for failing to welcome your honored arrival." She started to bow, but Li Zhong stepped aside, avoiding the courtesy. He did not answer her. He merely raised his eyes and surveyed everyone coldly. "Where is Shen Wei, Duke Zhengguo?" Old Madame Shen's heart lurched, and her smile faltered. "Chief Steward Li, my husband, went to the Western Hills camp early this morning. He is not at the residence." She smiled cautiously. "May I ask what important matter brings you here? Has His Majesty issued a decree?" Li Zhong drew a bright yellow scroll from his robes and slowly unfurled it before everyone. An imperial decree. Everyone in the front courtyard, old Madame Shen, Shen Yan, Liu Rumei, and every servant dropped to their knees. I alone remained standing on the step. Li Zhong glanced at me without comment and began reading aloud. "By the mandate of heaven, the Emperor decrees, Shen Wei, Duke Zhengguo, is a senior minister who consumes the sovereign's grain yet gives no thought to repaying the state. Instead, he colluded with imperial in-laws and embezzled northwestern military funds, unsettling the army and weakening the frontier. Worse, he communicated with an enemy state and sold military intelligence, causing the disastrous defeat in the northwest 3 years ago, in which Su Lai, Duke Dingguo, sacrificed himself for the country and 30,000 soldiers died on the battlefield. His crime warrants death and is intolerable to heaven and earth. On learning of this, we are grieved and outraged. We hereby order Li Zhong, Chief Steward of the Imperial Household Department, to seal the Duke Zhengguo residence immediately and take every member of the household to the Imperial prison for interrogation. Respect this." Every word of the decree struck the hearts of the Duke Zhengguo household like a heavy hammer. After hearing it, old Madame Shen's eyes rolled back and she collapsed. Shen Yan's face turned white as paper. He leaped up and pointed at Li Zhong, his voice trembling. "No, impossible, this is nonsense. My father has always been loyal to the court. He could never collude with the enemy or betray the country. Someone framed him. Someone must have framed the Shen family." Li Zhong looked at him coldly, as if at a ridiculous clown. He rolled up the decree and swept a hand forward. "Men, seize them." The officers charged forward and pinned down the shouting Shen Yan and the collapsed old Madame Shen. Liu Rumei screamed and turned to flee toward the rear courtyard, but 2 swift officers caught and dragged her back. "Let me go. Do you know who I am? My father is the Minister of Personnel. If you touch me, he will never let you go." Old Madame Shen had also recovered. Like a maddened lioness, she struggled desperately and stared at me through cloudy eyes. Suddenly she understood. "It was you, you wretch." She pointed at my nose and screamed herself hoarse. "You informed on us, you vicious, poisonous woman. How did the Shen family wrong you that you would frame us this way? I must have been blind to let an ungrateful wolf like you enter the Shen family." Standing high on the steps, I looked down at her furious, undignified display. The resentment accumulated in my chest for 3 years finally found release. I smiled radiantly. "Mother-in-law, how can your memory be so poor?" I descended the steps one by one and stopped before her. 3 years ago, my father died in battle in the northwest. Without food or reinforcements, 30,000 soldiers of the Sioux family army either starved and froze to death or were slaughtered by the enemy. I have remembered that debt clearly for 3 years. Tell me, should I not come to collect it? You. Old Madame Shen tried to curse again, but Li Zhong had lost patience. "Gag her." An officer immediately stuffed a filthy rag into her mouth. "Save your words for the Imperial Household Department prison." The officers began escorting the Shen family away. Shen Yan suddenly broke free and charged in front of me, glaring with blood-red eyes. His voice seemed forced from his throat. "Su Mingyuan, answer me. Did you never love me? Did you marry me 3 years ago solely for this day, for revenge?" I looked into Shen Yan's bloodshot eyes, filled with pain and accusation. I found it unbearably ironic. Love. Was he worthy of speaking to me about love? "Shen Yan, do you remember? 3 years ago, dressed in white and kneeling before my father's memorial altar, you swore an oath to me. You said you would treat me well for the rest of your life, support the entire Sioux family in my place, protect and respect me, and never let me suffer the slightest grievance. I believed you then. And the result? My voice remained calm, but it cut into his heart like a sharp knife, stroke after stroke. The moment you turned around, you joined those heartless parents of yours. Like hyenas smelling blood, you lunged for the Sioux family fortune and tore at it madly. You swallowed my dowry, seized my properties, and drove out every loyal servant and former subordinate my father left behind. You watched your mother torment me in every way and coldly brought one concubine after another into the household. Now you still have the face to ask whether I ever loved you. I leaned closer and spoke word by word for his ears alone. From the moment the Shen family entered the gates of my Sioux family home, I have felt only disgust and hatred for you. Shen Yan staggered back as though struck by lightning. Every trace of color vanished from his face. His mouth opened as though to speak, but not one word emerged. The officers seized the stunned man again. This time, he did not struggle. He merely stared at me with an unreadable gaze filled with regret, pain, and despair. Li Zhong approached me and bowed deeply. Miss Su, the matter is settled. We found Shen Wei's correspondence with the enemy state and the ledger recording the embezzled military funds in a hidden compartment of his study. Duke Zhengguo has also surrendered at the Western Hills camp. At last, Duke Dingguo's great wrong can be avenged. I curtsied to Li Zhong in return. Thank you, Chief Steward Li. Without your wholehearted assistance, Ming Yuan does not know how many years it would have taken to clear father's name. Li Zhong waved a hand, his eyes reddening. Miss Su is too courteous. Had Duke Dingguo not promoted and saved me years ago, my corpse would long since have lain exposed in the northwestern wilderness. To restore justice for Duke Dingguo has been my greatest wish in life. I nodded and turned to Wang Kui behind me. Wang Kui, bring the Namu chest from our courtyard. Wang Kui soon came running with the chest. Before everyone, I opened it and handed every piece of evidence inside to Li Zhong. Chief Steward Li, this is all the evidence I gathered within the Shen household over the past 3 years. These are the original letters written in Shen Wei's own hand to enemy generals. These are the detailed accounts of how he transferred and concealed the military funds he embezzled. And these are evidence of his collusion with other officials, sale of offices and titles, and reckless destruction of lives. Old Madame Shen's eyes went wide when she saw those familiar letters and ledgers. She struggled desperately, making muffled sounds through the gag, her eyes filled with absolute terror and disbelief. She likely could not understand, even at death's door, how a daughter-in-law she had never regarded had uncovered, piece by piece, the items her husband hid so carefully. Liu Rumei had already collapsed like mud. Weeping, she crawled to my feet and clung to my legs. Elder sister, no, Miss Su, I was wrong. I truly was wrong. I knew nothing about this. Nothing. My parents forced me to marry into this family. Please, please spare me. I do not want to die. I do not want to enter the imperial prison. I looked down at her, my gaze settling on the lustrous jade bracelet around her wrist. I said nothing. I merely extended my hand. Liu Rumei paused, then understood, as though burned. She fumbled to remove the bracelet and handed it to me with trembling fingers. Take it back, it belongs to you. I accepted the bracelet and carefully wiped every inch with my handkerchief as though it had been contaminated by something filthy. Then I carefully returned it to my wrist. The cool jade touched my skin, yet I felt immeasurably comforted. Mother, I have taken back what belonged to you. Li Zhong glanced at the evidence and nodded to me. Miss Su, rest assured, this evidence is enough to sweep up the entire Shen household and every person involved and condemn them to a death from which none can escape. The officers began sealing the household property and carrying chests of gold, silver, and jewels from the storerooms. Watching the busy chaos, I suddenly remembered the events of 3 years ago. It had also been an afternoon like this. News of my father's death on the battlefield had just reached the capital. The Shen family had charged into our Duke Dingguo residence with the same delight on their faces. They emptied my home, stole every honor my father earned with his blood, then threatened the lives of dozens of Sioux family members to force me into bridal robes and make me marry their precious son. Fortune's wheel always turned. The justice of heaven spared no one. An old nanny who had once served me approached unsteadily and knelt. Miss, no, Madam, you have finally survived it all. I helped her up, my voice gentle. Nanny Wang, please rise. From now on, everything in this residence will return to its rightful owner. And those of you who followed me here from the Su family will never suffer again. Just as Li Zhong was ordering the officers to place the Shen family in the prison carts, another commotion erupted outside the gates. Out of the way, everyone move. A slightly heavy-set, middle-aged man in official robes rushed inside, panting. He was Liu Chongzhe, Minister of Personnel and Liu Rumei's father. The moment he entered and saw the scene, he paused, then hurried to Li Zhong and bowed with clasped hands. Chief Steward Li, what is happening? There must surely be some misunderstanding. He looked at the Shen family pinned to the ground, then at Liu Rumei, sweating with anxiety. Duke Zhengguo has served as an official for many years and has always been loyal to sovereign and country. How could he commit the treasonous act of colluding with the enemy? When old Madame Shen saw Liu Chengzhe, her eyes lit as if she had found a lifeline. Unable to speak through the gag, she nodded desperately at him and glared venomously at me to indicate that I had framed them. Liu Chengzhe understood at once. He turned and examined me. You must be Miss Su. He stroked his beard and assumed the posture of an elder. Miss Su, this official knows you lost your father at a young age and carry great grief. But you are a woman who has long lived in the inner chambers. What could you understand of military and state affairs? Perhaps some villain deceived you and caused you to make such absurd claims. Chief Steward Li, you must not believe her one-sided words and wrong an innocent man. His speech sounded righteous while reversing black and white. He laughed, so hard that my shoulders shook. Minister Liu. I stepped forward and met his eyes. You say I understand nothing of military and state affairs. Presumably you understand them well. Then allow me to ask Minister Liu, 3 years ago, were you not responsible for supervising the transport of the winter provisions allocated to 300,000 troops in the northwest? Liu Chengzhe's face turned white instantly. What nonsense are you speaking? The shipment held a full 100,000 shy of grain, yet 30,000 vanished without cause along the road. You reported that mountain bandits had attacked and stolen it. Ignoring his defense, I continued. But to my knowledge, no bandits took those 30,000 shi. You secretly sold the grain to a Jiangnan merchant for 5,000 taels of silver, and those 5,000 taels in bank drafts were sent to your residence by Duke Zhengguo, were they not? You used the money to purchase a large estate outside the capital and buy an official post for your precious son. Am I wrong? You are making malicious accusations, complete nonsense. Liu Chengzhe pointed at me. His fingers trembled and sweat rolled down his temples. I did not waste further words. I merely signaled Wangqi with my eyes. She immediately took a small wooden box from inside her robes and handed it to Li Zhong. Chief Steward Li. This contains the correspondence between Minister Liu and Duke Zhengguo, along with witness statements and material evidence proving that he sold military grain. I had people pry this evidence, piece by piece, from a crack in the wall of Minister Liu's ancestral home. Li Zhong opened the box and glanced inside. His face immediately turned livid. He snapped the lid shut and looked at Liu Chengzhe with an icy gaze. What a loyal and patriotic Minister Liu. You embezzled military grain, treated human life as worthless, and conspired with the traitor Shen Wei. Men seized this parasite at the imperial court as well. Liu Chengzhe's legs gave way, and he collapsed, muttering, "Impossible, impossible." Those things were clearly burned. Seeing her father arrested and her last hope severed, Liu Rumei's vision went black, and she fainted. Old Madame Shen fell into complete despair. She stopped struggling and lay limp on the ground, staring blankly at the sky as though her soul had departed. Li Zhong approached and said quietly, "Miss Su, His Majesty has already issued a secret decree. Once the case is concluded, the Duke Dingguo title will be restored. Every Su family property that was seized will be recovered and returned twofold. His Majesty also said he will grant you a new residence as an additional reward." I nodded, warmth flowing through my heart. I was about to speak when a larger commotion sounded outside the gates. 2 officers escorted inside a disheveled man still dressed in armor. It was Shen Wei, Duke Zhengguo, who had just been arrested at the Western Hills camp. He still wore the armor symbolizing glory and rank, but it was covered in dust and his hair hung loose. Not a trace of the Duke's majesty remained. The moment he entered, he saw me standing safe and unharmed on the step. His eyes instantly filled with venom, Su Mingyuan. He roared and struggled, trying to lunge at me. I should have killed you long ago. I should never have softened my heart and left a calamity like you alive. I regret it. I regret not strangling you with my own hands on the day you married into this family. I slowly descended the steps and walked up to him. I looked calmly into the eyes reddened by fury and resentment. Shen Wei, do you remember that 20 years ago, when enemy soldiers surrounded you on the northwestern frontier? My father charged alone into an army of thousands and carried you out from a heap of corpses. You said then that my father gave you your life and that you would serve him like an ox or a horse, sparing no effort. I paused, watched his face stiffen, and continued. And how did you repay the man who saved you? You repaid kindness with betrayal. For military glory and wealth, you killed my father, swallowed my family fortune, forced me to marry your useless son, and allowed your family to bully and humiliate me. Shen Wei, you owe the Su family far too much. You deserve everything happening now. I did not come to frame you. I came merely to collect the debt. After hearing me, Shen Wei froze, then burst into manic laughter. Ha 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 ha. Collect the debt. Well said. Very well said. He laughed until tears came and looked at me with a hideous expression. What does it matter if I die? What does it matter if the entire Shen household is executed? Your father, Su Lai, will not return. The Su family will never regain what it once had. Su Mingyuan, you defeated me, but you are still a lonely widow with no one to rely on. You will never live happily. Watching his madness, I found him deeply pathetic. Even with death before him, he showed no remorse, and instead cursed me with the most vicious words. I slowly drew one final letter from inside my robe. The paper was yellowed and covered with crooked but deeply impressed characters. Chief Steward Li, this is a testimony written in blood by an old soldier who survived the Northwestern Army. I handed the letter to Li Zhong. It clearly records how, during the Northwestern battle 3 years ago, Shen Wei deliberately revealed the marching route of the 30,000 Zhua family troops commanded by my father to the enemy commander. It also records how he pretended to obey while deliberately delaying the reinforcements sent by His Majesty, leaving my father without arrows or food, surrounded in Gulan Valley where he died fighting. The instant he saw the letter, Shen Wei's smile froze. He jerked his head up and stared at me in disbelief, his voice trembling. How do you have that? That old man, had he not already? He did not die, I interrupted coldly. My father risked his life to save that veteran. For years I have hidden him at a farm outside the capital while he recovered. He has been waiting for this day, when he can stand forth and personally accuse the shameless traitor who killed his commander. Li Zhong trembled with rage after reading the testimony. He kicked Shen Wei behind the knee, and Shen Wei screamed and fell to his knees. Shen Wei, you heartless beast. Li Zhong pointed at his nose and cursed. Duke Dingguo treated you like a brother, yet you committed acts lower than those of pigs and dogs. Even cutting you into 1,000 pieces through slow execution would not extinguish my hatred. The surrounding officers and servants erupted when they heard the horrifying truth. Heavens, so Duke Dingguo was killed by him. One may know a face but not the heart. He always looked so respectable, yet he was such an ungrateful villain. He killed a loyal subject and betrayed the country. A man like that deserves the 18th level of hell. Hearing the accusations and curses around her, old Madame Shen could bear no more. Something rose in her throat. She spat out a mouthful of blood and lost consciousness completely. Shen Yan stared blankly at his father being cursed by everyone and his mother unconscious after vomiting blood, then turned to me. His expression moved from shock to regret, then utter despair. Suddenly, as though remembering something, he wrenched free of the officers and dropped to his knees before me. Bang, bang, bang. Again and again he struck his forehead heavily against the ground. Mingyuan, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Spare my parents. They are old and cannot survive prison. I beg you, if you plead with His Majesty and spare their lives, I will serve you like an ox or a horse. I will be your dog in the next life to repay your immense kindness." Blood soon covered his forehead, mixing with tears and mucus in a wretched mess. I looked at him coldly. "Shen Yan, answer me. 3 years ago, when my parents' memorial tablet stood in the hall and the Shen family forced me, the bereaved daughter, to marry you and avert your misfortune, where were you when my mother could not bear the humiliation and killed herself against the stone lion before your gates? Where were you when dozens of loyal Sioux family servants were driven into the streets and forced to beg for survival? Where were you when your mother forced me to kneel in the snow for 3 days and nights until I nearly froze to death? And now you say you will serve me like an ox or a horse. Too late." My questions left Shen Yan speechless, his face dark with shame. He could only continue kowtowing, producing dull thuds. I turned away, no longer willing to see his nauseating face. "Chief Steward Li, take them away. Do not let them dirty the Shu family's ground." Li Zhong nodded and waved. "Take them." The officers dragged the entire Shen household, along with Liu Chengzhe, into the prison carts waiting outside. As Shen Wei was taken away, he continued cursing me. "Su Mingyuan, you poisonous woman, you will die horribly. Even as a ghost, I will never let you go." I treated it as the barking of a mad dog. At last, the courtyard fell quiet. All the noise and ugliness faded with the departing prison carts. Wang Kui came to support my arm, tears falling like pearls from a broken string. Miss, we finally avenged the master and madam." I raised my head and looked at the vivid blue sky. Winter sunlight passed through sparse clouds and touched my face. It was warm. The boulder that had pressed on my heart for 3 full years was finally removed. I let out a long breath. After every Shen family member was taken away, the estate once called the Duke Zhengguo residence fell into an eerie silence. I ordered Wang Kui to summon every servant to the front courtyard. A dark crowd knelt on the ground, each person silent and afraid even to breathe. From today onward, this is no longer the Duke Zhengguo residence. It is the Su family home. My voice was not loud, yet it reached every ear clearly. Some of you are long-time Shen servants. Others followed me from the Su family. I will not pursue anything from the past. Now, I offer you a choice. Those willing to remain will become members of the Su household. As long as you are loyal, I will never treat you unfairly. Those unwilling to stay, or who received great kindness from old Madam Shen, and wish to follow their former masters, may step forward now. Collect 3 months' wages from the accounts office, and leave. The moment I finished, a faint disturbance moved through the crowd. After a moment, more than a dozen older servants, who had followed me from the Su family, led by Nanny Wang, spoke first. "We swear to follow Miss until death." Then more servants kowtowed. "Madam is benevolent. We are willing to stay and serve you with all our strength." Under the Shen family, the old Madam beat and cursed us, and often withheld our wages. Only after Madam arrived did we enjoy a few good days. "We will not leave, we will follow Madam." Warmth entered my heart as I looked at their sincere faces. The past 3 years had not been entirely without gain. At the very least, I had won people's hearts. I nodded. "Very well. Wang Kui, withdraw silver from the accounts office and give everyone present an additional 3 months' wages as a reward." The servants were overjoyed and kowtowed repeatedly in gratitude. "Thank you for the reward, madam." After settling the servants, Wang Kui and I went directly to the household storeroom, the most remote place in the residence and somewhere I had never entered in 3 years. A huge, rust-covered bronze lock hung from the door. Old Madam Shen had personally replaced it years ago and kept the only key. "Break it." I gave the order evenly. 2 strong guards stepped forward and shattered the lock with several blows from a sledgehammer. The heavy storeroom doors slowly opened, releasing a stale, mouldy odor. I walked inside. Gold, silver, jewels, antiques, paintings, and calligraphy filled the storeroom, all wealth the Shen family had squeezed from the people over the years. In the deepest corner, a huge dust cloth covered several objects. I walked over and pulled it away. As dust filled the air, familiar objects appeared. My mother's dowry chest still bore faded red wedding characters from the year she married. My father's armor stood quietly on a rack, still marked by blades and axes from the battlefield. There was also the Shu family's ancestral treasure, 10,000 li of rivers and mountains, painted by a master of the previous dynasty. Everything had been piled carelessly in this dark, damp corner beneath thick dust. I reached out and gently touched my father's cold armor. I remembered being very small when father wore this armor and carried me on his shoulders to see the lanterns at a temple fair outside the city. He had been so tall and warm then. In the end, tears still fell against my will. "Miss, do not be sad." Wankui came over and comforted me while helping wipe dust from the armor. "Fortunately, these things are still here. Otherwise, we truly would have no face to meet the master and madam in the underworld." I sniffed and nodded. Wankui arranged for people to move these items carefully into my former courtyard. "Yes, miss." As I turned to leave, a servant hurried over to report. "Madam, many people have arrived outside the gates. They say they were former subordinates of Duke Dingguo. When they heard what happened today, they came especially to request an audience." My heart stirred. "Quickly invite them inside." A short while later, more than a dozen robust, middle-aged men with a soldierly bearing strode inside. At their head was General Wang Qing, my father's former deputy. The moment they saw me, their eyes reddened, and they dropped to one knee in unison. "This general, these subordinates greet Miss General Wang. Uncles, please rise." I hurried forward and helped them up one by one. General Wang looked at me, his voice choked. "Miss, we finally lived to see this day. Duke Dingguo has been avenged. Even if we died now, we could face his grace in the underworld." I helped General Wang, the eldest among them, into a chair. "Uncle Wang, you are too grave. All these years, you have suffered." General Wang waved a hand. "What does a little hardship matter to rough men like us? You were the one who suffered, miss, enduring humiliation for years alone in a den of wolves." He paused. "Miss, now that the injustice has been righted, what do you plan to do?" "We old bones are ready to follow any command you give." After considering, I said, "Uncle Wang, I intend to sell part of the property returned to the Su family. I will use the money to compensate the families of the 30,000 soldiers who died beside my father in the Northwest. They gave their lives defending home and country. We cannot abandon their families." General Wang struck his thigh and rose. "Excellent, miss. This is truly benevolent and righteous. You are indeed Duke Dingguo's daughter with all your father's character. Rest assured, miss, leave this matter to us old fellows. We guarantee it will be handled properly without troubling you." Seeing the determination on their faces, I smiled from my heart. "Father, can you see this? The greatest treasure you left me was not mountains of gold or silver, but these loyal, courageous people of profound devotion." Early the next morning, an imperial decree arrived summoning me to the palace at once. I changed into an elegant, understated court dress, and accompanied by Wankui, boarded the carriage to the palace behind the eunuch bearing the decree. It was the first time in 3 years that I had left the cage imprisoning me. It was also the first time since my rebirth that I walked openly in the sunlight as Su Mingyuan, not a wife of the Shen family. Fine ambergris burned in the brazier inside the imperial study. The emperor, dressed in dragon robes, sat at his desk reviewing memorials. He looked far older than 3 years earlier, with white hair at his temples. "Su Mingyuan, daughter of a condemned official, greets your majesty." I knelt and bowed. "Rise quickly." The emperor set down his vermilion brush, descended the steps himself and helped me up. "Mingyuan, you have suffered all these years." His voice held exhaustion and guilt. Duke Dingguo served the country loyally, yet villains destroyed him. We failed to judge men properly, and the imperial court wronged the Su family. I lowered my eyes and said softly, "Your Majesty is too gracious. Father died loyally in service to the country, and his death was worthy. It is only chilling that villains held power." The emperor sighed and returned to the dragon throne. "Rest assured, we have already issued the decree. The evidence against Shen Wei, Liu Chengzhe, and the other traitors is conclusive, and their crimes are unforgivable. They will be beheaded in 3 days to console Duke Dingguo's spirit. We will posthumously grant your father the title Duke of Loyalty and Valor." Enshrine him in the imperial ancestral temple and bury him in the imperial mausoleum. Your mother will be posthumously named a first-rank titled lady. As for the Shu family assets seized by the Shen family, we will order them all recovered and returned to you twofold. In addition, we grant you 1,000 taels of gold, 100 bolts of silk, and the Duke of Loyalty and Valor residence in the Eastern City. I knelt again in gratitude. Thank you for your Majesty's immense grace. The Emperor waved for me to rise. You deserve all of this. At such a young age, you endured humiliation, gathered evidence, cleared your father's name, and eliminated a traitor for the country. Your courage and strategy do not fall short of your father's in the slightest. He looked at me. Beyond these things, is there any other reward you desire? If it lies within our power, we will grant it. I considered for a moment, then raised my head with a determined gaze. Your Majesty, Mingyuan desires nothing else. I have only one request and humbly ask for your Majesty's approval. Speak. I ask your Majesty to issue a decree allocating special funds from the state treasury to compensate the families of every soldier killed in the Northwestern battle. Those left alone and without support should receive additional care so they may live peacefully for the rest of their lives. They are heroes who sacrificed themselves for the country. Their families should not be forgotten. The Emperor paused after hearing me. He studied me for a long time. Surprise and approval filled his eyes before becoming a long sigh. Excellent. What profound righteousness. You are indeed the daughter of the Duke of Loyalty and Valor with all your father's character. We grant your request. He immediately raised his brush and personally wrote an imperial decree. We will not only compensate their families but build a shrine of loyal martyrs in the capital, so that future generations will forever remember their deeds. When I emerged from the palace holding the heavy decree, my steps felt much lighter. As I walked along the palace road, the bitter winter wind tugged at my sleeves, yet strength filled my entire body, Father. Mother, can you see this? The stain on the Sioux family's name has been washed away. The soldiers who died beside you have finally received the honor they deserve. Every wish I carried for 3 years was fulfilled today. When I returned home, General Wang and the others had already prepared a preliminary list of the fallen soldiers' families. I took out all 1,000 taels of gold awarded by the Emperor and handed them to General Wang. Uncle Wang, take this money and deliver it personally to every family on the list. If it is insufficient, withdraw more from our household accounts. Wang Kui felt somewhat reluctant and muttered, Miss, His Majesty gave that to you. I smiled and stroked her head. Silly girl, money is an external possession. Using it to give heroes' families peaceful lives is worth more than anything. Those soldiers were brothers who faced death beside my father. Their families are my family. It is only right that I care for them. At that moment, a messenger came from Lijiang. The Shen family's case had been concluded. Shen Wei, old Madam Shen, Liu Chengzhe, and the other principal offenders were convicted of treason, corruption, and rebellion and sentenced to immediate beheading. They would be executed at the Meridian Gate in 3 days, and all their property confiscated. Although Shen Yan had not directly participated in treason, as the eldest Shen son he had known of the family's crimes, failed to report them, and repeatedly concealed them. He was sentenced to exile 3,000 li away in the disease-ridden southern frontier, and would never return to the capital. Because of her father's crimes, Liu Rumei lost every honorary title and was reduced to commoner status, to be handled by the Liu family. It was said they had expelled her to sever ties, and no one knew whether she lived or died. After hearing the report, I merely nodded, my face showing no particular emotion. Wang Kui said with satisfaction, villains truly receive their retribution. Heaven has eyes. Yes, smiled. Yes, they deserved it all. From now on, the Sioux family will have no connection to those filthy people or affairs. We will close our gates and live our own lives well. 3 days later came the execution of Shen Wei and old Madam Shen. The capital streets emptied as everyone crowded to watch, throwing rotten leaves and spoiled eggs at the criminals in the prison carts. I did not go. The dead did not interest me. I merely asked Wang Kui to burn an extra stick of incense before my parents' memorial tablets. Father, Mother, you have been avenged. Rest in peace that afternoon. I was checking the final list of soldiers' families requiring compensation with General Wang in the courtyard when a servant came to report. Miss, a young gentleman surnamed Giyu requests an audience outside the gates. He says he is the son of an old friend of your father, surnamed Giyu. I was puzzled. I could not recall any of father's old friends bearing that surname. Invite him inside. A short while later, a tall young man in a green robe followed the servant inside. He was in his early 20s, handsome and steady, with eyes bright as the morning stars. The moment he saw me, he bowed with clasped hands. Gu Yun, left commandant of the Imperial Guard, greets Miss Su. My father, Gu Changfeng, served as a vice-general under Duke Dingguo. Gu Changfeng, I remembered. Uncle Gu had been one of father's closest brothers. He also died fighting in the Battle of Gulan Valley while covering my father's attempt to break through the encirclement. So you are General Gu's son. I quickly rose and helped him up. Young Master Gu, there is no need for such ceremony. Please sit. Once seated, Gu Yun came straight to the point. Miss Su, I came today first to congratulate you on clearing the injustice and avenging your father. Second, I came to thank you. Thank me. I did not understand. Gu Yun nodded solemnly. For years I secretly investigated the truth behind my father's death, but I held little rank or influence and met obstruction everywhere. I never imagined you would bring down the traitor Shenwei through your strength alone. You avenged not only your father but every soldier who died in the Northwest. On behalf of all their families, Gu Yun thanks Miss for this immense kindness. As he spoke, he began to rise and bow again. I hurriedly stopped him. Young Master Gu, I only did what I should. My father and yours were brothers in life and death. Their enemy was mine. Gu Yun smiled, took an old-fashioned wooden box from inside his robe, and handed it to me. Miss Su, this belonged to my father. Inside are letters he exchanged with your father and several notes written in your father's own hand. I have carried it with me since father died. Now it should return to its rightful owner. With trembling hands, I opened the box. The paper inside had yellowed slightly, but the writing remained clear. I lifted the top letter. It was in my father's hand. My nephew Yunair, I write as though we meet. Your father and I are as close as brothers. I am pleased to hear you have entered the army. Train diligently so that one day you may serve the country. Another note held only a few lines. When this battle ends, I will return home. I will fly kites with Yunair and teach her to ride. Looking at the familiar, forceful handwriting and the promise father could never fulfill, I could no longer contain my tears. Gu Yun said nothing. He silently took a clean handkerchief from inside his robe and offered it to me. Only after I regained some composure did he speak. Miss Su, please restrain your grief. He paused, then continued, in fact, I came with another request. His Majesty placed me in charge of distributing compensation to the families of the soldiers killed in the Northwest. I intend to escort the funds there personally and ensure that every soldier's family receives its share. I would like to invite Miss to travel with me. I raised my head and looked at him in surprise. To the Northwest, Gu Yun nodded sincerely. I know the Northwest is a place of grief for you, but it is also the land Duke Dingguo and my father defended throughout their lives. I believe you would like to see it. To see the land they once protected, and the common people and soldiers who still remember their kindness. His words moved my heart. Yes, I should go and see it. I should see the place where father died and pay respects to him and his 30,000 brothers, and meet the soldiers' families who remembered my father's kindness. I nodded. Very well, I will go with you. Wang Kui stood to the side, looking at us with an indulgent, knowing smile. I glared at her. She immediately lowered her head and pretended to arrange the teacups. Gu Yun also seemed to notice something. The tips of his ears reddened, and he scratched his head awkwardly. A subtle sweetness seemed to spread through the air. The moment Gu Yun left, Wang Kui hurried over. Miss Young Master Gu is such a fine man. He is handsome, honorable, and the son of a military family. He and our miss are simply a match made in heaven. Her words warmed my face, and I reached out to tap her. You talk too much, keep saying nonsense, and I will forbid you from eating osmanthus cakes for a month. Over the next few days, Guyun and I busily prepared for the journey northwest. When General Wang heard that we were going, he grew especially excited and volunteered to bring the surviving veterans with us. I have not returned to the northwest in years. It is the perfect chance to visit my old brother's graves, burn paper offerings, and tell them they have been avenged. Wonkui was even busier, never resting for a moment. She nearly emptied the entire house, first stuffing a thick fur robe into my luggage, then several packets of delicate pastries. Miss, the northwest is cold and windy. You must wear more layers and not let yourself freeze. The journey is long. Eat these pastries when you are hungry. Watching her try to wrap me like a rice dumpling left me torn between laughter and tears. All right, I understand. My dear Wonkui, we are not fleeing disaster. We do not need so much, and carrying it will be inconvenient. Guyun came to the residence almost every day. Unlike General Wang and the others, he did not arrive and immediately discuss important military matters. He always brought small gifts. Sometimes it was date paste cake from a new shop in the south of the city. Sometimes it was an herb said to work wonders for chills. He considered every possible problem I might encounter in the northwest, down to the smallest detail. With him present, I barely had to worry about anything. One afternoon, he arrived while I was reading the military texts father had left in the study. He sat beside me and spoke of warfare in the northwest. He said that as a child, he had lived in the northwestern army camp for a time with his father. The sky there, he told me, was far bluer than the capitals, and the grasslands stretched beyond sight. He also said my father had personally taught him to ride and shoot. Uncle Su was already a famous general throughout the land, yet he never put on airs before me. He even told me that when I grew up, I should become a great hero who stood tall like him. As he recounted the parts of father's past I had never witnessed, longing filled my heart. When our work in the northwest is complete, I will take you riding on the grasslands. Guyun looked at me with a smile in his eyes, just as Uncle Su once took me. All right. I smiled and nodded. While we were speaking, a servant suddenly entered to report. Miss, outside the gates, the Liu family has arrived. Liu Rumei's mother, Madame Liu, is kneeling outside and crying for you to see her. The smile vanished from my face. Them again, they truly haunted me like restless ghosts. I frowned and told the servant, bring her inside. Before long, Madame Liu was led in. Nothing remained of the elegance and splendor of a minister's wife. Her clothes were disordered and her hair disheveled. The moment she saw me, she dropped to her knees. Miss Suno, daughter of the Duke of Loyalty and Valor, please show mercy and spare our Rumei's life. She clung to my legs, sobbing through tears and mucus. Rumei was only confused for a moment and deceived by those Shen villains. She is not evil by nature. Now the Liu family has already expelled her, and she has no home. She is pitiful enough. If she is exiled as well, it will kill her. I looked at her coldly without speaking. Seeing me unmoved, she began emphasizing her misery. Miss Su, I know the Liu family wronged you. My husband. He was merely blinded by greed for one moment. For the sake of the time when Rumei called you sister, please show mercy and leave her a path to life. At last I could listen no longer. Madame Liu, I pulled her hands away and rose. When your daughter Liu Rumei wore my mother's keepsake and poured scalding tea over me before everyone, why does she not remember that she was not evil by nature? When your husband Liu Chengzhe embezzled military grain for a mere 5,000 taels and caused 30,000 soldiers to die in the northwest, why did he not remember that he was merely blinded by greed for one moment? Now retribution has arrived and you remember how to beg. I tell you, regret has no cure in this world. Liu Rumei brought her fate on herself. Liu Chengzhe deserves his death even more. I will not plead for her, not one word. Servants, escort her out. Madame Liu tried to continue, but two strong old maids dragged her away. Guyun had remained nearby without speaking. Only after Madame Liu was removed did he approach and say softly, "You did the right thing. People like that deserve no sympathy. We cannot repeat the story of the farmer and the snake." I nodded and dismissed the matter from my mind. I turned back to discussing our precise route northwest with Guyun. Nearby Wankui secretly raised a thumb and made faces at me. I pretended not to see, but unprecedented warmth and peace filled my heart. It was wonderful to have him beside me. At the beginning of the month, the day was auspicious for travel. The day of our departure brought unusually fine weather. I changed into riding clothes and tied my long hair high, looking valiant and spirited. General Wang and the others had prepared the carriages and procession outside the gates. Dozens of energetic veterans waited in orderly ranks, wearing armor and long sabers. Gu Yun approached, leading 2 magnificent horses, and handed me the reins of a chestnut mare. This horse is called Chasing Wind. It was presented as tribute from the western regions. She has a gentle temperament and great endurance, perfect for a woman to ride. I swung into the saddle with practiced ease. I turned for one final look at the estate behind me. The plaque at the gate had been replaced with a new one reading Residence of the Duke of Loyalty and Valor. The 4 gilded characters glittered in the morning light. I looked away, turned my horse, and nodded to Gu Yun. Let us go. The grand procession left the capital. Along the way, many common people came to see us off. They had heard how I cleared my father's name and secured justice for the fallen soldiers, and they stood voluntarily along both sides of the road. Some pressed homemade eggs and provisions into our carriages, while others bowed repeatedly in gratitude. Miss Su is a living bodhisattva. Thanks to Miss Su, my husband did not die for nothing. The simple kindness of the people moved me deeply. I gave them a solemn salute with clasped hands. Fellow elders and neighbors, rest assured, I, Su Mingyuan, swear that on this journey northwest, I will place every coin of His Majesty's compensation into the hands of every hero's family. The journey from the capital to the northwestern frontier was long. We traveled from dawn until night for nearly half a month before finally reaching the important northwestern city of Liangzhou. The moment we passed through the gates, many residents arrived and surrounded us. Most were families of soldiers who had died in the battle. Their clothes were ragged, and their faces showed the pallor of hunger. When they heard that we had come by imperial decree to deliver compensation, everyone's eyes reddened. They knelt in unison and kowtowed in thanks. Gu Yun and I hurriedly dismounted and helped them up one by one. Please rise, everyone. You must not bow to us. Your loved ones stained the battlefield with their blood to defend home and country. They were great heroes who stood tall beneath heaven. They deserve this honor, not us. Over the next several days, with help from General Wang and the local authorities, Gu Yun and I visited every household on the list and personally delivered the compensation. Some families consisted only of widowed mothers and orphaned children living in great hardship. On my own initiative, I gave them additional silver from my private treasury. Take this money and buy several lengths of new cloth for the children. Make them new clothes, buy rice and flour, and live well. A white-haired old woman held my hand and sobbed too hard to speak. Good girl. You are such a good girl. When my old man fought beside Duke Dingguo, His Grace often used his own money to deliver rice and grain to military families like ours. Now His Grace is gone, but his daughter has come to care for lonely old people like us. Our entire family will remember the Su family's kindness. My heart ached, and my eyes grew wet. That evening, after everything had been settled, Gu Yun took me to the Gulan hillside outside the city. It was the site of the Northwestern War's most brutal fighting. Dense burial mounds covered the slope. There were no gravestones, only cold stones. My father's cenotaph stood among them. Jar after jar, I poured the finest Enhong wine brought from the capital before the graves. Your daughter has come to see you. I avenged you. I also fulfilled your final wish. Rest in peace with your 30,000 brothers. The evening wind rustled the wild grass across the hillside, like an answer from the heroic spirits. After distributing all the compensation, we remained in Liangzhou for several more days. Gu Yun kept his promise and took me to the grasslands outside the city. He taught me to gallop and draw a bow from horseback. The wind roared past my ears, and the feeling of freedom left my heart lighter than it had ever been. I looked back with a smile at Gu Yun nearby. He had also reined in his horse and was watching me with a smile. Afternoon sunlight fell across his handsome profile, surrounding it with a golden halo. At that moment, my heart missed a beat. We remained in the northwest for nearly a month. Only after every matter was settled did we begin the journey back to the capital. On the day we left, the people of Liangzhou came voluntarily to see us off. They packed our carriages with fruits and local specialties from their own homes. After we returned, His Majesty specially summoned us to the palace and praised our journey to the northwest. Mingyuan, Gu Yun, you handled this assignment very well. We are greatly pleased. The emperor looked at me and asked, Mingyuan, you have rendered great service. Name any reward you wish. I instinctively glanced at Gu Yun beside me just as he turned to look at me. Our eyes met, and my cheeks instantly burned. I lowered my head and said softly, Your Majesty, Mingyuan. Mingyuan desires nothing more. The emperor noticed the subtle exchange between us. He paused, then clapped and laughed. Ha 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 ha. Very well. So you desire nothing more. We understand. Within days, an imperial marriage decree arrived at the Duke of Loyalty and Valor residence. His Majesty betrothed me to Gu Yun, Left Commandant of the Imperial Guard. The decree said we were both descendants of loyal subjects, a talented man and a beautiful woman, a perfect couple matched by heaven. When the decree arrived, Wang Kui was happier than I was. She embraced me, laughing and crying with excitement. Miss, your suffering is finally over. You will finally marry the husband of your dreams. Gu Yun began visiting our residence almost every day. One day he brought a fine set of South Sea pearl ornaments. The next, several bolts of precious Jiangnan cloud brocade. He feared I might suffer the slightest grievance. On our wedding day, my red dowry procession stretched for 10 li, astonishing the entire capital. People lined both sides of the street, each eager for a glimpse of the bride. Look, that is Miss Su, daughter of the Duke of Loyalty and Valor. Good people truly receive good fortune. Miss Su suffered so much, and now she has finally married the husband she wished for. During the wedding ceremony, I peeked through a gap beneath my veil at Gu Yun standing opposite me. He wore brilliant red wedding robes, his figure tall and extraordinarily handsome. His eyes brimmed with a gentle smile as he watched me without blinking. I could not help curving my own lips. I remembered being forced to marry Shenyan 3 years earlier. There had been the same scarlet wedding robes and the same joyous clamor. But my heart had been utterly dead. Today, my heart overflowed with sweetness and hope for the future. Our married life was peaceful and happy. Gu Yun treated me wonderfully. He remembered everything I liked and pampered me like an innocent young girl. His parents were also reasonable and treated me as their own daughter. I never again had to be cautious at every turn or plan every step. With my savings, I opened an academy in the capital for the orphaned children of fallen soldiers, providing them with education, literacy, and martial training for self-protection. Gu Yun fully supported me. Occasionally, I visited father on the hillside outside the city. I told him many things, including that I was living well now and that he should not worry. Gu Yun accompanied me every time, standing silently beside me and holding my hand. Once, leaning against his chest, I asked, Gu Yun, why were you so certain about me from the beginning? He lowered his head, kissed my forehead, and smiled. Because the first time I saw you, you stood on the steps watching the Shen criminals being taken away. Everyone else was lost in the thrill of revenge. Only your eyes were clear and resolute without the slightest madness blinded by hatred. At that moment I knew. You were the person I, Gu Yun, wanted to protect for the rest of my life. I leaned against his chest and watched the brilliant sunset on the distant horizon. It felt as though I had endured all the bitterness this life could hold. Everything remaining was sweet.